In the lands carved by the Tigris River, restless skies, and the most fertile lands of West Asia, by 2600 BC, the history of Assyria doesn't actually start with that name, but rather the name Subartu, which the ancient Sumerians gave to the lands of northern Mesopotamia. Assur was a god, actually, a fierce deity embodying the spirit of people destined for greatness and for violence, like a lot of violence. The city of Assur had the same name, but written differently by scholars to differentiate. Sargon of Akkad conquered it as he expanded his empire in the 24th century BC. The following rulers gave the area the name it will keep for the following millennium and a half: Ma'at Assur, literally meaning land of Assur. Yeah, creativity wasn't a priority at the time. It was a little bit more important to not starve and all that. Making Akkadian into their main language and teaching them cuneiform writing. Around 2025 BC, it was little more than a fortified settlement, but it emerged as a beacon of faith and ambition. You see, the early Assyrians were a people of as much zealousness as desire for wealth. While the kings ruled in name, it was the merchants who breathed life and resources into Ashur's dreams, using chunks of silver as their money. Their city wasn't just a random settlement. It grew strategically as a river port and trading hub in all of northern Mesopotamia, linking the Fertile Crescent with Anatolia to the north and Syria to the west, being a crossroads of cultures and commerce.
Tell me, brave and handsome soldier, do you actually guard the city, or just stand there looking menacing and important?
Well, if I didn't stay here looking menacing, how else would the merchants know who to tip if they don't want to come back home empty-handed? Even in ancient Assur, corruption and good manners kept things away from being boring. After 2025 BC, the Old Assyrian period takes place. This era is best known for the expansion of trade networks across the Middle East. Long caravans trace dangerous routes to Anatolia, trading tin, silver, and textiles, willing to go through these perilous journeys in exchange of making some good money. Setting up trading posts in Anatolia, like in Kanesh with an N, modern-day Kul Tepe, not to be confused with Kadesh with a D. This city became their distant outpost, where Assyrian traders carved a niche amid a tapestry of cultures. These merchants were not just traders, but also heralds and spies, gathering intelligence for their city. This led to the popularity of the Karun-Kanesh trading system between them and Assur from 1950 BC. It was a private, family-based system, not run by the state. The spread of the use of investment, profit-sharing, interest-bearing loans, written contracts, rustic forms of banking, and their pioneering in long-distance trade led to them becoming the first vestiges of capitalism in history. Thousands of clay tablets from Kanesh, etched with cuneiform script, survive until today, revealing contracts, loans, and legal disputes, and also it shows the far reach of the earliest human writing system. And around 1750 BC, enter the first Indo-European civilization, the Hittites. Guten Morgen! What a great amount of wealth you have in here! I'm sure this development in the market will lead to progress in human civilization.
What is this gibberish you're speaking?
It would surely be sad if someone sacked it all. Yep, the Hittites ended the golden age of the Karun system by sacking the city after 2 centuries of riches. But the prosperity of Assur wasn't only from commerce. The city was ruled by kings who had to balance trade with military defense.
Assur demands victory. We march at dawn.
Glorious King Shamshi-Adad, with all due respect, can Assur also grant us some better sandals? Some soldiers are bleeding from their feet. They will need more rest if Assur doesn't help us.
Fear not, brave general. Chances are that the spears of the enemy will grant them all the rest they need.
Born in exile, Shamshi-Adad I knew hardship, but it is not unusual to say that diamonds are made under pressure, and this was the case, because around 1808 BC he returned to Assur with a vision, not merely to rule a commercial city, but to forge an empire. With sword and strategy he waged wars, but also formed alliances through marriages. He improved on early battering rams, siege ladders, and other military tactics, with which he expanded Assyria's territory to include other parts of northern and middle Mesopotamia, and even parts of Syria, expanding what used to be a mere city-state into what some call the Old Assyrian Empire, side by side with the growing domain of Hammurabi's Babylon. Under his reign, Assyria began to shift from just a commercial power to a military one, nothing but a sample of what it will become later on. When Shamshi-Adad I died, his mighty empire crumbled almost overnight. Assur shrank back from empire to city-state, overshadowed by new powers. The Kassites in Babylon, the rising Hittites in Anatolia, and the Hurrians and Mitanni to the north, as Assyria became a vassal state of the latter. For centuries, as the great kingdoms around it wavered and fell into their own struggles, especially family issues, Assyria patiently waited. Yet even as they descended into their dark ages, burdened by misery and cruel taxes, the people's faith in their god Assur did not falter. On the contrary, it grew stronger. He was no longer just a guardian, but the divine source of the kingship of their monarchs. By 1700 BC, Assur had become a supreme god for the Assyrian people. Even if they accepted the existence of others, these were clearly inferior in their eyes. This, my friend, was the earliest step towards Abrahamic monotheism in the history of mankind, the so-called henotheism. Remaining as a beacon of faith, Assur seemed to fade into the shadows of history. But history, as they say, is not a straight line. Around 1364 BC, the Old Assyrian period came to an end, and the Middle Assyrian began, with imperial intention. Enter King Ashurbanipal I. This king, wanting to overthrow the Mitanni, didn't just charge against them, but rather laid the groundwork with alliances, letters, and opportunism, until the strike was unavoidable. Marrying his daughter to a Babylonian king, now the Mitanni just couldn't attack their Assyrian rebels without the Babylonians having an excuse to show up to the party, so they were forced to get into defense mode. The Assyrians got ready to face the Mitanni in their own land.
Soldier of the Mitanni, I have a joke for you. Vassal state.
What? I don't get it.
Exactly.
He boldly ended Assyria's status as a Mitanni vassal, declared himself an independent king until 1330 BC, and breathed new life into Assyria's military and political power, being not only a warrior king but also a savvy diplomat. This era saw the proper establishment of Assyria as a significant military power, flipping the cards against the Mitanni, who were now at risk of becoming the vassal state of Assur. After the death of Ashurbanipal I, his son Enlil-nirari inherited a fragile state, defending his hard-won independence from the Kassite rulers of Babylon. The two powers clashed at Sugagi, with neither side achieving a decisive victory. But Assyria held its ground. Next came Arik den Ili, freaking name, a cautious ruler who faced Gutian threats from the east and ongoing tensions with Babylon. Because if something is clear in Mesopotamia, is that the weirdos from the mountains are not to be underestimated, especially considering that they conquered the area twice. Though not an aggressive conqueror, he maintained internal stability and kept the Assyrian state intact during difficult times. Then the tide turned. Adad-nirari I, a grandson of Ashur-uballit, proving to be a military innovator and strategist, he declared himself king of the four corners of the universe. He faced the last big revolt from the last Mitanni king, making their land a province of Assyria, called Hanigalbat, and expanded Assyrian control westward into Syria, reaching the peak extent of the Middle Assyrian Empire by 1275 BC. His son, Shalmaneser I, built on these gains with ruthless efficiency. He waged campaigns across Anatolia and Upper Mesopotamia, founded the future capital Kalu, and used terror tactics, blinding prisoners and resettling populations to cement control, giving the Assyrians a very bad reputation of being a nefastus culture. But after comes Tukulti-Ninurta I, Shalmaneser's son, who reached even higher. Not only was he one of the first Bronze Age rulers to begin experimenting with iron in a usable manner, but he also expanded towards Babylonian ground, taking territories and key cities.
Brother, what day is it?
I used to know it's the third month of 1321 before Christ.
And who the heck is Christ?
I have no assuring idea.
How long do we have to stay here? I'm starting to miss my wife's cooking.
Shh! Don't start talking about cooking. The people inside the walls are starving.
Isn't that what we want?
Yeah, but it's offensive, you know. You might get cancelled. Despite the constant warfare, Assyrian soldiers had their moments of levity. After all, you might go insane if you don't make at least one joke during a 3-month siege. The efforts of Tukulti led him to be able to siege Babylon, not an easy task, since his enemy was one of the strongest armies of the time. But improvised siege gear and techniques allowed the Assyrians to get a decisive victory, capturing his king and removing the sacred statue of Marduk, claiming the Babylonian throne. But his blasphemous pride led to rebellion. His own sons, likely disgusted with his rule and sacrilege, overthrew and murdered him. In the aftermath, Assyria fell into chaos. Brief and unstable reigns followed. Ashur-nadin-apli, then Enlil-kudurri-usur, who was even captured by the Babylonians. The empire, once fearsome, seemed to crumble. But the hopes were put in Ninurta-Palekur, a figure from exile in Hanigalbat, possibly of both Assyrian and Mitanni royal blood. He marched on Assur, not as a conqueror, but as a savior. From a humble trading town in 2600 BC to a sprawling empire by the end of the following millennium, Ashur's story is one of ambition, resilience, henotheistic faith, the art of unaliving, and even entrepreneurship. Its story is far from finished, not only because this video is way too long to keep on talking about it, but also because it is carried forward by the modern Assyrians who still walk the lands their ancestors once ruled to this very day in North Iraq and parts of Syria and Turkey. Their language, culture, and especially history are well kept to honor such a remarkable past. And that's everything. If the room looks completely different and you've heard a lot of noise and echo throughout the video, that is because I am in Cuba. You might even hear some music in the background that is not intentional at all. So yeah, now if you excuse me, I have a problem to deal with. This is not empty yet, so I'll see you later. Ciao!